We are approaching now the end of this seminar, and it's my pleasure now to hand the microphone to Mr. Gerhard Volz, who has been assigned the task to outline the policy and practical takeaways for carving comprehensive approaches. And Gerhard Volz is the head of the Department for International Cooperation and Higher Education at the OeAD. That is the Austrian Agency for Education and Internationalisation. So thank you so much, Gerhard.
Dear Anhild, thank you very much for your kind introduction. My challenge will now be to summarize three things. First of all, the very inspiring discussions, the main messages from the contributions of today's conference. Second, I will bridge to the content of the ACA's position paper, which has been published yesterday. And third, I will bring in some thoughts from my own side on this very up-to-date topic. When we look at the picture of internationalization today, we have to recognize that the whole framework, as we have known it for the recent decades, is rapidly changing. This is of course not new to any one of you. It seems rather to be an acceleration of ongoing developments of the past 10 or 15 years. 2 years ago, we had no clue about such thing as a global pandemic, and even if we still do not know where the current developments will lead us, we have to realize that there is a need of new, and I mean really new, approaches towards student and staff mobility. In the course of this event, we've been discussing a number of important perspectives regarding the significance of fully inclusive formats when it comes to, let me call it, internationalization based on personal interaction. We have to reiterate that we must not, by no means, leave anyone behind when we talk about internationalization and cross-border mobility. International experiences have to be open to each and everyone, be it students who are only able to follow their courses after working hours or on the weekends, be it the teachers who will need assistance during their teaching assignment abroad because of the fact that they are dependent on a wheelchair. The pandemic has demonstrated that we need to go further than just thinking the unidimensional model of traveling from point A to point B. That we need to think further than just the classical study abroad semester in another country. We need not only to address but to implement inclusiveness, digitalization and sustainability in a synergetic manner. All three benefit from another. We have to detect where they meld, where the interfaces are, and now, as the conference topic suggests, we have to marry them. In fact, I'm very grateful to see that Erasmus Plus has noticed the signs of time and that hybrid and blended mobility formats and even virtual exchanges have been developed even before COVID-19. All this will allow people to participate in mobility activities who haven't been able to do so. And it gives a lot of flexibility also to our higher education institutions. However, they would now have to adapt their structural approaches towards today's learning pathways of their students. And I'm afraid this will be a continuous and not always an easy exercise for them. Having said all this, let me please repeat another message. Digitizing internationalization alone will not by itself sort out the challenges of academic internationalization of today. Yes, digital mobility is clearly more sustainable when it comes to our carbon footprint. However, without face-to-face meetings, without looking into each other's eyes, we will never be able to transmit the social aspects and the informal learning elements of transnational mobility. I will never forget the words of a former colleague of mine many years ago, working at a well-respected Austrian university. We have a lot of international contacts in the field, he said, but I won't start a scientific project with anyone before I haven't been for a drink with this person. And I think this depicts a lot. So what are the policy and practical takeaways of today? When listening to the contributions of today's event and when looking at the position paper of ACA, let me reiterate some key points. First, European strategies must always contribute towards the innovative processes of the academic landscape in Europe and beyond, not only strategically, but also as hands-on as possible. Strategic approaches are always as good as they're taken up and implemented on the ground. Let's be careful not to draft rather distant messages. Second, however, overarching strategies should always take into account successful examples from either member states, universities, or specific programs. We've heard some examples today from Ghent University, from Hungary, and there are examples also in the position paper of ACA. Third, we have to both focus on key messages, let me call them guiding principles, and at the same time stay as flexible as possible. Diversity is a resource in European higher education and for the European higher education area, and thus there's a need of bridging the needs of different actors. Fourth, we should elaborate a more strategic and forward-looking approach to monitoring, collection, analysis and use of data in order to really grasp the impact of our messages. And fifth, in order to make results more tangible on all levels, there should be some measures which can enhance multilateral collaboration on specific thematic aspects between member states, between internationalization agencies, between universities or other stakeholders. This could, for instance, be study visits or other formats which contribute towards the common increase of knowledge. All those elements mentioned by now from my side are probably quite understandable when working on a strategic level. But, and that's not to be forgotten, there is work on the ground too. It's the nitty-gritty issues. Jakub today said the devil is in the details. So if we speak about truly inclusive mobility, we must not forget to ask ourselves, do we have appropriate funding schemes in order to achieve our strategic targets? When it comes to students and staff, are there sufficient vaccination opportunities offered in order to travel internationally or even nationally? Today's topic when we look around in the scene of the pandemic. And a bit further, do we understand internationalization in a really holistic way or rather narrow? Do we acknowledge that an international environment can not only be found in Paris, in Tokyo or in Chicago, but in the front of our doors or on the streets of our cities? Do our frameworks of visa regulations and entrance regulations already fit to an extended understanding of international and transnational interaction? I'm afraid not yet. Here is still some way to go, and beside all strategic approaches, we have to remain pushy on those issues. Having in mind our overarching targets, high quality internationalization and mobility, we are all asked to flexibilize our approaches, to flexibilize our curricula and our activity frameworks. We will have to cater for truly inclusive and participatory internationalization. We will have to reduce unnecessary travel for the sake of our planet, and we will have to strive for the use of virtual formats wherever they fit to the expected outcomes of our initiatives. The Academic Cooperation Association, ACA, as a stakeholder association consisting of almost 20 European agencies, fully endorses the ongoing European strategy processes. We're entirely committed to the approach of co-creation, and if you allow me to speak for all the partner agencies, we will always be ready to support European or international stakeholders such as the European Commission in this regard. You have received the position paper of the ACA on the upcoming European strategy for universities. I invite you to read this paper and to participate in the process on the European level as well as in your national and in your institutional environment. Austria has adopted a national higher education mobility and internationalization strategy last year, which will serve as a guideline for many of the discussed topics. My own organization, the Austrian Agency for Education and Internationalisation, OeAD, is taking part in a number of working groups, and needless to say, we are in continuous exchange with our universities. So to conclude, I'd like to advocate once more for a last point. If you allow me this personal note, let's talk to each other. Let's never stop communicating. Mobility and communication are very close. They are confederates. They are already married. Thank you very much.
So I'm very glad that I don't have the task nor the time to wrap up the discussion, the more so that Gerhard has done a wonderful job in doing so. Just one remark comes to my mind. Michael made the case for monogamy, and it's a good point, so we rather probably need to reconcile different competing objectives and strike a balance, or rather probably balances, because what I learned from this discussion, I learned a lot of things in this rich discussion, is that there are, in different environments, in different situations, there are different ways to strike a balance between these objectives, and we need to organize a process and find the tools to actually do that in every given environment. Let me conclude by saying a few words of thanks. First of all, to our wonderful speakers here on the spot and online. Thank all the participants here again and across not only Europe, as I saw, but apparently across the globe, and particularly those who contributed to the discussion by asking questions. There were probably more questions asked than answers given, but that's always the point, and we'll keep them in mind, I think, when we continue our conversation, our communication, which is so vital for our work. Let me thank the organizing committee from the ACA Secretariat, Irina, Veronica, and the representatives of the Brussels-based organizations, member organizations in this event. And last not least, let me thank the people behind the stage, or in that case, behind the audience. So those who actually organized this conference and made it technically possible, and I think except the one glitch we had at the beginning, we have had a very smooth hybrid conversation, and I think it is encouraging to see that that is possible, and it is thanks to those who set it up in the first place. So I think all of those have deserved a round of applause. So now it's lunchtime. For those here in the room, I think it's just outside. For those not in this room, they will probably find a way to have lunch. And at any rate, bon appetit. Thank you.